Also really interesting to think about that the whole sort of let's have a triad, let's have all these weapons that we will have a concept of mutual assured destruction. So
Missiles that can cross continents in minutes. Frontlines stretching from Eastern Europe to the Pacific. No place on Earth would be truly untouched in a war as devastating as World War III. Even once safe havens like the US or remote parts of Europe could find themselves in the crosshairs. World War III wouldn't look anything like the past wars we've seen before. In the past, battlefields were mostly concentrated in specific regions, and distance often offered some level of protection. That's not the case anymore. With today's advanced missile technology and hypersonic weapons, no corner of the world is guaranteed safety. Missiles can cross entire continents in minutes, and even places that were historically shielded like the US or remote areas of Europe could find themselves under threat. The potential front lines of this war are clear: Eastern Europe, the Korean Peninsula, and the Indo-Pacific. These regions would see intense fighting, with troops, tanks, and aircraft locked in large-scale battles. But this war wouldn't stop there. The reach of modern weaponry means destruction could stretch far beyond these hot zones. A missile strike in one region could trigger a retaliatory strike thousands of miles away, pulling even distant nations into the chaos.
I'd be looking down at southern Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, this type of breadbasket area of planet Earth.
Finding a truly safe place during World War III would be no small task. In a conflict of this scale, safety isn't just about being far away from the action, it's about understanding how the war unfolds and why certain areas are more vulnerable than others. Geography, politics, and strategy all play a role in deciding which places might offer refuge.
Countries are friendly with each other as well. Like I have Argentinian friends and stuff like that, and they know that I love Uruguay, and I go back and forth to Uruguay and stuff. They're like, yeah, Uruguay's like our little brother. We love them. The
safest regions would be those that steer clear of the world's biggest rivalries. Countries caught in the crossfire of geopolitical tensions like Eastern Europe or the Indo-Pacific would almost certainly become battlegrounds. For example, places like Taiwan or Poland, which are deeply tied to the planes of global powers, would be at high risk. Staying away from such flashpoints is crucial. Another factor is relevance. Some areas hold military or economic importance, whether it's key resources, strategic bases, or trade routes, and would likely become targets.
I think is the Pacific Islands. Now, people have mentioned, hey, during World War II, the U.S. did testing in some of the islands, but let's talk about places where you can go. One expert said there are just a few island nations that could continue to produce enough food to feed their population after an abrupt sunlight-reducing catastrophe.
When it comes to staying safe during World War III, isolation could be your greatest ally, and few places offer that better than the remote islands of the Pacific. Fiji and Tuvalu are two standout options thanks to their location far from major battlefields and their lack of strategic importance to global powers. These islands sit quietly in the vast Pacific, far removed from the chaos that would erupt in hotspots like Eastern Europe, the Indo-Pacific, or the Korean Peninsula. Fiji, for example, is over 1,900 miles away from Australia, which is expected to be heavily involved in any major conflict. It has no significant military alliances or resources that would make it a target. With its small military and a focus on peace, Fiji is the kind of place global powers would overlook in wartime. Tuvalu is even more remote. With a tiny population and no real role in global politics or military strategies, it's hard to imagine any nation wasting missiles or resources on such a quiet corner of the world. The biggest challenge, though, would be getting there. If global transportation grinds to a halt, reaching these islands could become nearly impossible.
Both for immigration from certain kinds of people. Again, Peter Thiel got citizenship in New Zealand many years ago, and you think, hey, if the world...
New Zealand stands out as one of the safest places you could be if World War III ever broke out. Its location alone makes it a solid choice. Over 2,000 miles away from Australia, it's far removed from the hotspots where intense battles are most likely to unfold. Even the most advanced military powers would find it challenging to target a country so isolated in the South Pacific. What makes New Zealand even more appealing is its self-sufficiency. The country produces enough food to feed its population, meaning it wouldn't be as reliant on global supply chains as many other nations. In a world where trade routes could be completely disrupted, New Zealand would still be able to sustain itself. It's also energy independent, with a significant portion of its power coming from renewable sources like hydropower and geothermal energy. Beyond its practicality, New Zealand offers comfort. Its low population density and vast natural landscapes provide plenty of space to live away from potential threats. The country has abundant natural resources, fertile land, and a stable infrastructure, which makes it a place where you could not only survive, but thrive. In a world plunged into chaos, New Zealand might just be one of the last safe havens.
Because Iceland is isolated from the rest of the world by the North Atlantic Ocean, it would be very difficult for a nuclear missile to reach Iceland without being detected first, said one policy paper. They've got
If you're looking for safety in the northern hemisphere during a global conflict, Iceland and Greenland are two of your best bets. Both are remote, cold, and far from the main battlefields, but each offers unique advantages for those seeking refuge. Iceland is part of NATO, which means it could be involved in a World War III scenario, but it's not a primary military target. Its role in the Guyuk Gap, a key naval choke point between Greenland, Iceland, and the UK, adds some strategic value, but Iceland itself wouldn't likely see heavy fighting. The country's isolation, combined with its strong infrastructure, makes it a practical choice for survival. Iceland is also energy independent, relying on geothermal and hydropower, so even if global supply chains collapse, you'd have heat and electricity to keep you going. Its thriving fishing industry ensures you wouldn't go hungry, and the small but resilient population would likely come together to face any crisis. South America might just be one of the safest places to be if World War III ever broke out. This continent, often overlooked in global power struggles, has a unique combination of distance, natural defenses, and relative neutrality that makes it a hidden sanctuary during times of global conflict. Chile, in particular, stands out as a strong option. Nestled between the Pacific Ocean and the towering Andes Mountains, its geographic isolation offers natural protection. The Andes act as a formidable barrier, making any invasion or large-scale military operation incredibly difficult. Historically, Chile and much of South America have stayed out of the world's major conflicts, which further reduces the risk of being drawn into a global war. On top of that, Chile is self-sufficient in many ways. Its fertile lands and agricultural strength means that food shortages are less likely to be a problem. The country has also made significant strides in energy independence, with a growing reliance on renewable resources like solar, wind, and hydropower. While there may still be some challenges, such as occasional power outages, these are minor compared to the dangers elsewhere.
Survivor of the Nagasaki bomb. And I haven't written about this yet. But someone I interviewed and someone that meant a lot to me wired that nuclear weapon that was dropped on Nagasaki.
The idea of a nuclear escalation during World War III is the nightmare scenario. It's the kind of event that changes the world forever, making even the safest corners of the Earth feel fragile. A nuclear exchange doesn't just destroy cities, it sends shockwaves through the entire planet. The initial blasts would cause unimaginable devastation, but the long-term effects could be just as deadly. Nuclear weapons release massive amounts of radiation, creating fallout that can drift for hundreds of miles, poisoning the land, water, and air. Even if you're far from the immediate impact zones, the radiation can turn otherwise safe havens into uninhabitable wastelands. Crops would fail, water supplies could become contaminated, and the environment itself would become hostile to life.
An appraisal of nuclear winter. Their work illuminated the devastating impact that nuclear conflict could unleash upon Earth's climate.
Beyond the fallout, the climate would suffer. A large-scale nuclear war could trigger what scientists call a nuclear winter. The smoke and soot from detonations would block sunlight, causing temperatures to plummet. This sudden climate shift could lead to widespread food shortages, as farming becomes impossible in many parts of the world. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.